He pulled a stranger from a flooded road, only to learn she was the reclusive heiress who'd change his destiny forever. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The rain had been falling for hours, turning the old county highway into a rushing river that swallowed the center lines and blurred the world into streaks of gray. The storm's howl pressed against the cracked windows of Elias Ward's pickup, but he barely noticed. He had lived through enough bad nights to recognize when danger was thick in the air. His wipers beat back torrents of water in frantic strokes as he crept along the flooded road, headlights slicing through sheets of rain. Most folks would have turned back by now, but Elias wasn't most folks. He was the kind of man who stayed until the last engine stopped running, the kind who showed up when the river rose, the kind who didn't wait for someone else to help. Tonight, he was only out here because Mrs. Dalton's generator had given out, and at her age, spending a storm night without heat wasn't an option. Elias had just finished fixing it and was heading home when he saw it, a pair of taillights, half submerged, flickering wildly like a distress signal. His foot slammed the brake before his mind even caught up. The small sedan sat tilted, water already swallowing the wheels. Through the downpour, he spotted movement inside. A pale hand slapped weakly against the window. Someone was trapped. Damn it, he muttered, grabbing the coil of rope he kept for emergencies. The wind punched him the moment he stepped out, rain stinging his skin like needles, runoff pushing against his legs hard enough to make him stagger. But he pushed forward, boots sinking into cold, rushing water. The closer he got, the clearer he saw her. A woman in a soaked white blouse, drenched hair plastered to her face, eyes wide with panic behind the fogged glass. She wasn't screaming. She didn't have the strength left. Hang on, Elias shouted, though he doubted she could hear anything over the roar of the storm. He wrapped the rope around his torso and anchored the other end to a road sign that shook under the wind but held firm. The water rose fast, swirling around the car like it wanted to swallow it whole. Elias forced his way to the driver's side, gripping the handle. Locked. She pounded on the window again, weaker this time. It's okay, he yelled, bracing himself before slamming his elbow against the glass once, twice, 3 times, until it cracked, then shattered inward. A surge of icy water rushed in. She gasped as he reached through, his fingers finding her wrist. I've got you, he shouted, tightening his grip. She was trembling, lips turning blue, breath shallow. She tried to speak, but only a faint rasp came out. The current fought them both as he pulled her through the broken window. For a terrifying second, the water nearly wrenched her from his hands, but Elias hauled her against his chest and staggered backward toward the rope. Stay with me, he breathed, more to himself than to her. Her head rested weakly against his shoulder, the storm washing away the dirt on her skin but not the fear in her eyes. Inch by inch, he dragged them both towards solid ground until finally his boots hit the edge of the flooded asphalt. He carried her up the embankment, collapsing to his knees beneath the shelter of a leaning pine. Her body was cold, frighteningly light in his arms. Hey, look at me, he urged, brushing wet strands from her face. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused, disoriented. She whispered something he couldn't make out, her voice barely a breath. Lights from his truck glimmered in the distance, but the storm swallowed everything else. Elias shrugged off his jacket and wrapped it around her, the fabric instantly soaked but still warmer than the biting wind. You're okay, he murmured, checking her pulse, steady but faint. You're safe now. But he had no idea who she was, no idea where she'd come from, no idea that the woman lying in his arms, half conscious and clinging to life, was the reclusive heiress whose name had disappeared from headlines 2 years ago, the heiress whose return would shake an empire, the heiress whose survival would tie her fate to his forever. And tonight, in the rain and the ruin, she was just a stranger he refused to let die. The storm eased only slightly as Elias lifted the unconscious woman into the passenger seat of his pickup truck, the interior lights flickering over her pale face. Her breathing was shallow, each inhale tight and trembling, as if the cold had reached somewhere deeper than her skin. Elias shut the door gently, ran around to the driver's side, and turned the heater on full blast. "Come on, stay with me," he murmured, glancing at her again. Rain hammered against the roof like fists, but inside the cab there was a fragile pocket of warmth. She looked so delicate up close, almost unreal, with a faint scar near her temple and lashes clumped with river water. For a moment, Elias found himself wondering what she had been doing alone on a road no one used during storms like this. But right now, questions could wait. Survival could not. He grabbed a blanket from behind the seat, the old army green one he always kept for emergencies, and wrapped it around her shoulders, tucking it securely against her chest. Her body shivered beneath the fabric. She whispered something again, so faint he could barely hear it. It sounded like a name, or maybe a plea, but her voice faded before he could catch it. They were 15 minutes from the nearest clinic, and he knew every minute mattered. Elias shifted the truck into drive and pushed forward, tires cutting through rising water. The windshield fogged instantly, and he wiped it with his sleeve, keeping his eyes on the barely visible road. "You are going to be fine," he said, not sure if he was reassuring her or himself. The heater hummed loudly, fighting the cold that clung to her like a shadow. Every few seconds he glanced over, checking her chest for movement. She was breathing, but shaky, uneven. As the truck climbed to higher ground, the floodwater thinned, and the storm softened into a relentless drizzle. The world outside returned in faint shapes, pine trees bending under the weight of water, muddy ditches overflowing, distant flashes of emergency lights from volunteer rescue crews. Elias slowed when he spotted the dim glow of the small-town clinic up ahead. Its windows flickered like candles fighting the wind. He parked in the emergency drop-off lane, jumped out, and pulled open her door. "I have you," he said as he lifted her again. She was light, almost weightless in his arms, but the chill radiating from her skin made him clench his jaw. The clinic doors flew open when he shouted for help. A nurse rushed forward with a stretcher, and together they eased the woman onto it. "What happened?" the nurse asked, adjusting the oxygen mask already pressed to the woman's face. "Car got taken by floodwater," Elias said, breathless. "She barely got out." The nurse nodded and signaled the rest of the staff. They wheeled her down the hall, voices overlapping in rapid assessments. Elias followed until he reached the staff-only line on the floor. He stopped there, hands still trembling, his jacket dripping onto the tiles. He stood in the hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the storm muffled behind the clinic walls. He did not even know her name. He realized that as he stared at the door they had taken her through. No idea who she was, where she lived, who might be looking for her. She was just a stranger he dragged from death's grip. A stranger who had looked at him with wide, terrified eyes in the rain. Minutes stretched into something slower, heavier. A doctor finally stepped out, removing his gloves. "Are you the one who brought her in?" he asked. Elias nodded. "She is stable for now," the doctor said. "Severe hypothermia and shock, but you got her here in time." Relief hit Elias so suddenly it made his knees weak. The doctor continued, "She has no identification on her. We will keep her overnight for observation. If you know how to reach her family." Elias shook his head. "I do not even know her name." The doctor studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. "If she wakes up, maybe she will tell us." Elias walked back out to the lobby, sat heavily in a plastic chair, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in an hour. He intended to leave. He really did. But something in him refused to walk out that door. So he stayed, watching the rain streak down the windows, waiting for news about a stranger who should not have mattered to him, but somehow already did. Hours passed in the small-town clinic, the storm outside, easing into a gentle tapping against the windows, but Elias Ward did not move from the hard plastic chair where he sat. His clothes were still damp, his boots leaving a small puddle beneath him, yet he stayed perfectly still, staring at the hallway where they had taken the mysterious woman. He told himself he was only waiting to make sure she lived. Nothing more. But the truth gnawed at him quietly. Something about the way she had clung to his shirt when he pulled her from the water, the way her eyes had searched his face in those final moments before she slipped into unconsciousness, had anchored itself deep inside him. It was close to midnight when a nurse finally approached him. "She is resting now," the nurse said softly. "Her vitals are improving." Elias nodded with a breath of relief. "Can I see her?" he asked before he could stop himself. The nurse hesitated for a moment, but then motioned for him to follow. Only for a minute. They walked down the corridor, past rooms glowing with soft yellow lights and shadows moving behind curtains. The nurse stopped at a door and pushed it open. Elias stepped inside quietly. The room was dim except for the monitor beside the bed, its steady beeps filling the silence like a fragile heartbeat. She lay there beneath clean white blankets, her hair spread across the pillow in gentle waves, her face no longer ghostly pale, but still marked by exhaustion and cold. Someone had brushed the dirt from her skin, revealing delicate features and a faint bruise near her temple. Without the storm around her, she looked almost unreal, like someone pulled out of a different world entirely. Elias stood by the doorway, unsure if he should come closer. Eventually he stepped toward the side of the bed. He did not touch her, but he lowered his voice as if she could somehow hear him through sleep. "You scared the life out of me out there," he murmured. "Do not do that again." As if responding, she shifted slightly, her brow tightening before relaxing again. The nurse checked her chart and whispered, "Shock can make memories fuzzy. She may not remember much at first." Elias nodded. "Do you know how long until she wakes up?" "Hard to say, but she is trying," the nurse replied gently. "Her body is fighting its way back." Elias stayed until the nurse reminded him visiting hours were technically long over. He reluctantly stepped outside into the cold night air, the scent of wet asphalt and pine drifting around him. His truck was still parked near the clinic entrance, the blanket he had wrapped around her earlier still bunched on the passenger seat. He picked it up, holding it for a moment, remembering how cold her skin had felt. When he finally returned home, the house was dark except for a single lamp. His grandmother, Alma, sat up in her old recliner, knitting needles in her lap. She looked up with tired eyes. "You are back late," she said. "Storm get worse." Elias hung his wet jacket on the hook and exhaled slowly. "I found someone on the flooded road. A woman. She nearly drowned." His grandmother set her knitting aside immediately. "Is she alive?" "Yes," he said. "Barely, but she is alive." Alma studied him, reading the weight in his shoulders like a book. "And you stayed until you knew she would be all right." It was not a question. Elias shrugged, rubbing a tired hand across his face. "I could not just leave her." Alma's smile was knowing, gentle. "Your heart has always been a little bigger than your sense." Elias changed into dry clothes and made himself a cup of coffee, even though it was far too late for caffeine. His mind replayed the same moments over and over. Her face behind the fogged glass, the way she whispered something he could not understand, the grip of her cold fingers when he pulled her from the car. He barely slept that night. And at sunrise, with barely 2 hours of rest, Elias found himself driving back to the clinic without even thinking about it. He told himself he just wanted an update, nothing more. But when he walked inside and reached her room, he froze. The bed was empty. Her belongings were gone. And the nurse at the desk said 5 words that tightened something deep in his chest. She woke up and left. The nurse added, she did not say where she was going. She just asked for her clothes and walked out. Elias stared at the doorway to the empty room, his heartbeat beginning to thud in a slow, heavy rhythm. She was gone. A stranger he had saved from the flood. A stranger who vanished before he even learned her name. And something about that disappearance felt wrong. Very wrong. As if the storm had carried her away again, but this time into a place he could not follow. The words "she woke up and left" echoed in Elias Ward's mind long after the nurse walked away. He stood motionless in the doorway of the empty room, staring at the neatly folded sheets and the faint outline where her body had rested hours earlier. It made no sense. She had been barely strong enough to breathe on her own the night before. How could she simply get up and walk out? The nurse insisted she had been steady, quiet, determined. But something in Elias tightened with unease, like a string pulled too hard. People who almost drowned do not vanish without a word, especially when they have no identification and no way home. He stepped outside into the morning air, the sun barely rising over the drenched town. The storm had passed, leaving behind a chill that crept into his bones. His truck sat exactly where he had left it, the blanket he had wrapped around her now folded on the passenger seat. He picked it up and ran his thumb over the frayed edge, remembering how cold she had been, how close she had been to dying. "Why would you disappear?" he muttered under his breath. The drive back home felt longer than usual. His grandmother was already making breakfast, the smell of eggs and butter filling the kitchen. She looked at him the moment he stepped in. "You did not sleep," she said knowingly. Elias sank into the chair, setting the blanket on the table. "She is gone." Alma paused with the skillet in her hand. "Gone." She woke up and left the clinic before sunrise. No name, no paperwork, nothing. Alma studied him for a long moment. "Do you think she was in trouble?" Elias did not answer at first. He remembered the bruise on her temple, the fear in her eyes even before the flood overtook her, and the way she whispered something that sounded like a warning. "Maybe," he finally said. "Or maybe she was running from someone." Alma plated the food, but Elias barely touched it. His mind kept circling back to the same questions, looping like a tire spinning in mud. Who was she? Why was she on that road in the middle of a storm? And where would she go with no car and no belongings? By mid-morning, he could not sit still anymore. He climbed into his truck and drove back toward the washed-out highway where he had found her. The storm had carved deep trenches in the dirt, and the river still churned angrily beneath the broken guardrail. Her car was gone, towed by emergency crews, but the tire marks and debris still clung to the edge of the road. Elias walked closer, scanning the muddy ground. Something shiny caught the sunlight near a patch of reeds. He crouched down and picked it up. A silver bracelet. Thin, elegant, with a small charm shaped like a crescent moon. It looked expensive, far too refined for someone who could not afford a motel room or a change of clothes. When he turned it over, he saw an engraving on the inside. A single letter. A. He closed his fist around it. "So you did leave something behind," he whispered. He slipped the bracelet into his pocket and kept searching the area, but there was nothing else. No footprints, no torn fabric, no sign of where she had gone after climbing the embankment. Just the quiet hum of the recovering river and the distant cry of a hawk overhead. As he headed back to the truck, his phone buzzed with a notification from the local news. He glanced at the screen. A headline flashed across it. "Hail Dominion heiress still missing after 20 months. Beneath it was a photo of a young woman with calm eyes and dark hair flowing over her shoulders. Elias's breath caught. It was her. The woman he had dragged from the flooded road. The woman who vanished without telling anyone her name. Aurora Hale. An heiress who had disappeared from the public eye nearly 2 years ago, with rumors ranging from kidnapping to self-imposed isolation. Elias stared at her photo, then at the bracelet in his hand. The engraving made sense now. Hey. He felt his heartbeat slow into something heavy, deliberate. She had not just run away from the clinic. She had been disappearing long before that night. And if she was Aurora Hale, then her sudden escape from the clinic was not coincidence. It was fear. Real fear. Elias slid the bracelet into his pocket again, his jaw tightening. If she was running from someone, then she might still be in danger. And whether it made sense or not, whether he had the right or not, Elias knew one thing with absolute clarity. He could not let her face that danger alone. For a long moment Elias Ward sat in his truck, the engine off, the morning sun glinting off the small silver bracelet resting in his palm. The engraved letter, A, stared back at him like a whisper, a clue, a heartbeat. Aurora Hale. Missing heiress. The woman he had pulled from a flooded road without knowing she carried a last name powerful enough to shape cities. He closed his fist around the bracelet, feeling its weight. It was delicate, elegant, nothing like the rough world he lived in, but it felt strangely right in his hand, like something that had been waiting to be found. He put the truck in gear and headed back toward town, thoughts racing faster than the wheels beneath him. He did not know much about corporate empires, but he knew what fear looked like, and she had worn it like a second skin even before the river dragged her under. He replayed the scene in the clinic hallway where the nurse said she left alone. No one in her condition would walk out without a reason, without urgency. Something or someone must have pushed her to flee. As he drove, he passed the bakery, the hardware store, the familiar places of a quiet town. But today the world felt different, like a curtain had been lifted and something larger waited in the shadows. When he pulled into his driveway, his grandmother Alma was tending her small herb garden, humming softly. She looked up when he stepped out of the truck. "Did you find anything else?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. He hesitated before showing her the bracelet. Alma took it gently, turning it in her fingers. "This is not cheap," she said. "And that charm, it is custom work." "It belongs to her," Elias said. "Aurora Hale." Alma's eyes lifted quickly. The Hale Dominion heiress? The one who vanished. Elias nodded. It is her. I saw her picture on the news. It is the same woman. Alma crossed herself instinctively. Lord help that girl. If she disappeared, she must have had a reason. Powerful families attract powerful danger. Elias had been thinking the same thing. He returned to his truck, leaned against the door, and tried to make sense of everything. The more he thought, the more certain he became that Aurora had not left the clinic to hide from him. She had run because she feared being found by someone else. Someone she did not trust. Someone she might be running from still. Later that afternoon, Elias decided to retrace her possible path. If Aurora had left the clinic on foot, there were only a few ways she could have gone without attracting attention. He checked the streets, the bus stop, the quiet alleys behind the grocery store. Nothing. But as he walked the back road behind the old library, he noticed something odd on the ground near the drainage ditch. Muddy footprints. Slight, light, too small to belong to a man. They led away from the main street and into the tree line. Aurora, he whispered. He followed them, moving carefully over the uneven ground. The prints stopped near a cluster of brush. At first he saw nothing. Then he spotted it. A piece of white fabric snagged on a branch. He reached out and gently pulled it free. It was from the blouse she had worn in the truck, torn at the seam. She had been here. Recently. And not steady on her feet. Elias's pulse quickened with worry. He scanned the woods. Where did you go? He murmured. A distant rustle answered him, faint but unmistakable. He stepped toward the sound, pushing aside branches until he reached a small clearing. There, leaning against a fallen tree, struggling to stay conscious, was Aurora Hale. Her hair hung damp around her face, her clothes still marked by mud and rain. Her breathing was shallow again, each inhale sharp with exhaustion, and her skin was too pale. She looked up slowly when she heard him approach, her voice barely above a whisper. You found me. Elias crouched beside her, slipping an arm behind her back to keep her from collapsing. You should not be out here, he said, trying to steady her. Why did you leave the clinic? Aurora swallowed hard, her eyes flicking toward the trees as if checking for danger. I cannot stay in one place. They will find me. Elias felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Who? She tried to speak again, but her voice cracked and faded. Her body went limp against him as her strength gave out completely. Elias tightened his hold, fear jolting through him. Someone had driven Aurora Hale into hiding. Someone powerful enough to terrify an heiress into walking barefoot through the woods after nearly drowning. As he lifted her into his arms, one truth settled heavily on his shoulders. Whatever she was running from was not finished, and now that he had found her, it was coming for both of them. The moment Aurora Hale collapsed in Elias Ward's arms, every instinct inside him roared to move. He carried her through the trees, branches scraping his shoulders as he pushed toward the road with steady, urgent steps. Her head rested against his chest, her breath shallow and uneven. Every few seconds she tried to lift her hand as if to warn him of something, but her strength faded each time. Elias reached his truck, opened the passenger door with one hand, and gently settled her inside. He tucked the blanket around her again, brushing the damp hair from her forehead. You are safe now, he whispered, though he was no longer sure it was true. He climbed behind the wheel and turned toward home. The clinic was too exposed. If someone was hunting her, the first place they would check was any medical facility. Home was not much safer, but Alma could keep a secret, and their quiet house on the edge of town had always been a shelter for people in trouble. Aurora drifted in and out of consciousness during the drive. Twice, she murmured something, her voice too weak to form full sentences. The third time, he leaned closer, hoping to catch the words. Do not let him find me. Elias tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Who? He asked softly. Aurora's eyes fluttered open, filled with fear and something else, an old hurt that seemed to run deeper than the bruise on her temple. Victor. The name was barely a breath before she slipped back into the haze of exhaustion. Elias recognized the name instantly. Victor Hale. The cousin who had stepped into the spotlight when Aurora vanished. The one who had given clean, polished interviews claiming he wanted only to protect the family legacy. Elias had seen the man on television. Something about him had always felt cold, too polished, too calculating. Now the unease made sense. If Victor Hale was the person Aurora feared, then her disappearance had not been a mystery, or a tragedy. It had been survival. When Elias pulled into his driveway, Alma was waiting on the porch, worry etched in every line of her face. She hurried toward the truck the moment she saw Aurora slumped in the passenger seat. "Good Lord," Alma whispered. "Bring her inside quickly." Together they carried Aurora into the house and laid her on the living room couch. Alma placed a warm cloth on her forehead while Elias grabbed blankets and started the fireplace to chase away the lingering cold in Aurora's body. After several minutes, Aurora stirred, her eyes opening slowly. She blinked, confused, then focused on Elias kneeling beside her. "How did you find me?" she whispered. "You left a trail," Elias said gently, holding up the torn piece of white fabric. "I followed it." A small, fragile relief washed across her face before she flinched and tried to sit up. Elias steadied her with a hand on her shoulder. "You are safe here," he said. "No one is going to hurt you." Aurora shook her head weakly. "You do not understand. If Victor finds out I survived the river, he will come after me again." Alma's breath caught. Again. Aurora closed her eyes as if holding back a memory too sharp to touch. "He needs me gone. As long as I live, the board will not give him full control." My disappearance was supposed to quiet questions, but not quiet enough. Elias felt something cold settle in his chest. "Did he tamper with your car?" Aurora nodded faintly. "He made it look like an accident, and everyone believed it. When I woke up after the crash months ago, I hid. But Victor's men kept searching, so I kept running." Elias exchanged a look with Alma. There was fear in the old woman's eyes now, but also resolve. Alma placed a gentle hand on Aurora's arm. "You stay here tonight. You are too weak to go anywhere." Aurora hesitated, then whispered, "I trust you, but you should not be involved." Elias shook his head. "It is too late for that." Aurora looked at him, her voice trembling. "Why?" Elias answered quietly. "Because I do not leave people in the water. Not then, not now." A soft sound caught their attention, a car slowing outside on the gravel road. Elias's eyes shot to the window. A black sedan, unfamiliar, creeping past the house as if searching for something. Aurora's breath hitched. "They found me." And in that moment, Elias knew the storm they escaped was nothing compared to the one heading straight for them. The black sedan rolled slowly past the house, its tinted windows reflecting the pale morning light like a dark, watchful eye. Elias Ward felt every muscle in his body tense as he stepped instinctively in front of Aurora Hale, shielding her from the view of anyone outside. Aurora's breath trembled as she clutched the blanket around her thin frame, her eyes wide with a terror that came from memory, not imagination. Alma peeked through the curtain only enough to see the taillights disappear down the road. "That was no neighbor," she said quietly. Elias nodded. He already knew. "They are scouting," Aurora whispered, her voice cracking. "Victor uses private contractors. They search patterns, not people. They will circle back." Elias turned to her, steady and grounded like the storm-hardened man he had always been. "Then we need to move before they do." But Aurora shook her head, grasping his wrist with surprising strength for someone so weak. "Elias, if they see you with me, you will become a target too. You do not understand what Victor is capable of." Her eyes filled with something that was not fear this time, but guilt. "People around me get hurt." Elias held her gaze. "People get hurt when good men stay out of things they should stand up to." Alma placed a gentle hand on Aurora's shoulder. "You are not alone anymore, dear." Aurora's throat bobbed with emotion, but before she could answer, the distant hum of the sedan returned. Elias's jaw tightened. "Back." He guided Aurora toward the hallway while Alma grabbed her old cordless phone. The sedan slowed again, creeping almost to a stop near the mailbox. Then a door opened. A man stepped out. He wore a sleek dark coat and carried a tablet, like someone checking census records or property lines. But his posture had the sharpness of someone trained to observe. Elias's pulse thudded as the man scanned the area with cold precision. For a moment Elias thought he might approach the house. Instead, the man crouched near the ditch, inspecting the mud. Elias knew instantly what he was doing, looking for footprints. Aurora squeezed Elias's arm. "He is tracking me," she whispered. "He knows I left the clinic." The man stood, typed something on the tablet, then spoke briefly into an earpiece. His body language shifted. Alert. Focused. Searching. "They know I headed this way," Aurora said, panic inching up her voice. Elias took a slow breath and forced calm into her trembling hands. They do not know you made it this far, he said. But they will if we stay still. He looked toward the back of the house. There is a shed in the woods. Old hunting cabin. No electricity, but it is dry and hidden. Aurora hesitated. Elias, if they hurt you because of me, if I let something happen to you, he said softly, I would never forgive myself. Alma handed Aurora a worn coat and placed her other hand over Elias's. Go, she said. I will keep them away as long as I can. Elias guided Aurora out the back door, moving through the trees with careful, deliberate steps. The forest was dense, branches dripping from last night's rain, the smell of pine and wet earth thick in the air. Behind them, the sound of another car door slamming made Aurora flinch. They are splitting up, she whispered. Elias tightened his arm around her. We are almost there. 15 minutes later they reached the small cabin, half hidden by overgrown brush. Elias pushed the door open, revealing dusty shelves, old blankets, and stacks of firewood. Aurora sagged against the wall, exhausted. I used to hide here when I was a kid, Elias said quietly, when the world felt too heavy. Aurora managed a faint smile. Does it feel heavy now? He knelt in front of her, brushing dirt from her cheek. Not when I know what I am protecting. Her breath caught, fragile and trembling, as if she had forgotten what it felt like to be protected at all. A twig snapped outside. Elias froze. Aurora's eyes widened. Voices followed, low, muffled, too close. Elias motioned for silence and stepped toward the window, peering through a crack in the wood. Two men in dark coats were moving through the trees, sweeping the ground with flashlights even in daylight. They were searching methodically, like predators closing in on prey. Aurora gripped the edge of the blanket, her knuckles white. Elias, they will not. Stop. Elias turned back to her, eyes steady with a promise he did not need to speak aloud. Then neither will I. Outside, the men drew closer, their footsteps slow and deliberate. The hunt had begun, and Elias knew that if they found Aurora now, the flood she survived would be nothing compared to the danger waiting to swallow her next. The footsteps outside grew slower, heavier, more deliberate, as if the men tracking Aurora Hale could sense she was nearby. Elias Ward pressed his back against the wall of the old cabin, listening with every sharpened instinct he had. The woods were quiet except for the soft hiss of wind slipping through wet branches. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. Aurora sat curled near the corner, wrapped in one of the dusty old blankets, her eyes never leaving Elias's face. She was pale, exhausted, still recovering from the flood and the shock, but there was something new in her expression now, something that flickered between fear and determination. Elias crouched beside her and whispered, "Do not make a sound. They will pass." She touched his arm gently, her voice barely a thread. "Elias, what if they find us?" He met her gaze, steady and unshaken. "Then I make sure they do not touch you." The crack of a twig right outside the cabin made Aurora tense violently. A beam of a flashlight swept past the window, cutting through the dim interior. Elias placed a calming hand on Aurora's knee. Through the crack in the wall, he watched the two men scan the area, their movements practiced, their eyes cold and calculating. One of them spoke into a radio, no sign yet. "But she came through here. Tracks are fresh." Elias felt Aurora stiffen beside him. He leaned close and whispered, "They think you walked, not that someone carried you." Aurora let out a shaky breath, understanding the advantage. After several agonizing minutes, the men moved further into the forest, their lights fading into the distance. Elias waited until the silence settled again before easing away from the wall. "We cannot stay here," he said. "Not for long." Aurora nodded slowly, but her body trembled from more than fear. Elias helped her sit up straighter. She looked at him with eyes full of something deeper, trust, and maybe the beginnings of a fragile bond forming between two people who should never have crossed paths. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "You could walk away and pretend none of this ever happened." Elias shook his head slowly. "I did not pull you from that river to abandon you when things got harder." Aurora swallowed, her voice barely steady. "You do not understand what Victor wants. He will erase anyone who stands between him and the company. He already erased me." Elias's jaw clenched. "Then we show people the truth." She blinked, stunned by his certainty. "How?" "I have no proof. No voice. No board member will listen to a runaway heiress without evidence. Elias hesitated for a moment, reaching into the pocket of his jacket. Maybe you do have something. He pulled out her bracelet, the delicate silver one engraved with the crescent moon and the single letter A. Her lips parted, emotion flashing across her face as he placed it gently in her hand. Elias, I thought I lost this. It was near the flood site, he said. Seems important. Aurora closed her fingers around it. It is. There is a microchip inside. It stores encrypted files, financial records, documentation, correspondence. My father gave it to me before he died. He warned me that someone inside the company was trying to undermine the succession plan. Elias felt his pulse quicken. And that someone was Victor. Aurora nodded slowly. The board never knew about the chip. But if we can extract the files, it will expose everything he has done. Elias moved closer, his voice low but firm. Then that is what we do? We take this to someone who can help. Who? Aurora asked. Everyone loyal to my family is gone or scared. I do not know a single person I can trust. Elias held her gaze, the weight of his promise clear and unwavering. You can trust me. Before Aurora could speak, the sound of a car engine rumbled in the distance again, this time not moving slowly, but approaching fast. Aurora's face drained of color. They are coming back. Elias grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the back door of the cabin. Then it is time to stop running, he said. It is time to fight back. Aurora paused, holding tightly to the bracelet, and looked at him with a quiet, breaking certainty. Then whatever happens next, we do it together. Of all the storms that had threatened her life, this was the first moment she felt the possibility of hope, because this time, she was not facing it alone. The forest behind the cabin erupted with the roar of engines as the black sedans surged closer, cutting through the trees like metal predators closing in for the final kill. Elias Ward tightened his grip on Aurora Hale's hand, feeling the tremor of fear in her fingers, but beneath it was something stronger now, something that had not been there the night he pulled her from the flooded road. Resolve. Stay behind me, he whispered. Aurora held the bracelet to her chest, its hidden microchip carrying the truth powerful enough to destroy the man who had hunted her for nearly 2 years. Elias, she whispered, if they get this, everything is lost. He met her eyes with a steady determination. Then they will not get it. They slipped through the back of the cabin, moving through the trees as the shouts of Victor's men drew closer. Elias guided Aurora through a narrow path only he would know, one that curved around a ridge and led to a clearing overlooking the town below. There, he pulled out his phone and dialed a contact he rarely used, Deputy Sheriff Mason, someone who had known his father and owed him a quiet favor or two. Mason, Elias said, keeping his voice low, I need backup at the Hale Dominion headquarters, and I need you to trust me without questions. Mason grumbled, confused but alert. Elias, what is going on? I have Aurora Hale, Elias said plainly. Silence. Then Mason exhaled sharply. You alive? After 2 years. Yes. And in danger right now. Mason did not hesitate after that. Meet me at the station. I will arrange transport. Quietly, Elias hung up and turned to Aurora. We are taking this to the authorities. We reveal the files, bring the board in, and make this public. Victor cannot silence all of them. Aurora hesitated, fear and hope colliding in her gaze. If we do this, everything changes. There is no going back. Elias brushed a thumb over her cheek. Maybe that is the point. They reached the edge of town, sticking to back roads until they made it to Mason's office. The deputy met them at the door, stunned at the sight of Aurora, but understanding immediately when he saw the bruises on her face and the desperation in her eyes. They drove in an unmarked SUV to Hale Dominion headquarters, a towering glass building overlooking the city skyline. As they entered through the private lower-level garage, Mason spoke into his radio, coordinating officers and quietly alerting a state investigator who had been suspicious of Victor Hale for months. Aurora clutched Elias's arm as the elevator rose. I am afraid, she whispered. Good, he murmured. If you were not, this would not matter. When the doors opened, the boardroom was already full. Executives, security, and state investigators stood waiting. Victor Hale turned sharply when he saw Aurora step inside. For a moment, his face cracked, not with grief or relief, but with raw, furious shock. You, he hissed. You were supposed to be gone. Aurora stepped forward, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. I survived you, Victor. And now everyone will see what you tried to hide. She placed the bracelet on the table. An investigator tapped it, and the room's screens lit up with encrypted files, financial transfers, sabotage orders, and evidence of the staged accident meant to eliminate Aurora. Gasps filled the room. Victor lunged toward her, but officers grabbed him instantly. You think this will save your family's company? He spat at Aurora as they dragged him away. It will save its integrity, she replied. Something you never understood. The moment Victor was taken out, Aurora's strength finally gave way, and she turned into Elias's chest, trembling. He wrapped his arms around her, grounding her in a way no money or power ever could. Months passed. Victor was formally charged. Hale Dominion stabilized under Aurora's leadership and a newly appointed oversight board. And through it all, Elias stayed by her side, not as a bodyguard, not as an employee, but as the man who chose her long before he knew her name. 1 year later, on the anniversary of the flood, Aurora led Elias to a quiet riverside clearing. She handed him a small wooden box. Inside was his old rope, the one he had tied around himself the night he pulled her from the flooded road, cleaned, restored, and framed under glass. You saved my life before you knew who I was, she said softly. And every day since then, you have saved me again. Elias looked at her with something warm and unshakable. I did not save you, he said. We saved each other. Aurora stepped closer, lifting her face to his. Then stay, she whispered. Stay with me. Elias smiled, the river breeze brushing past them like a blessing. Always. And as the sun set over the water that once tried to take her life, the two of them stood together, not as a rescuer and an heiress, not as two people from different worlds, but as the unexpected miracle neither of them had seen coming.